and I have this knee-jerk reaction in my mind that I subdue of like, it's okay, push through it. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to evolve and learn that that may not be the best response. There is a way to empathize and explore her emotions.
Welcome to the Relational Parenting Podcast. I'm Jennifer Hayes, a parent coach and 20-year childcare veteran. Each week, I sit down with my own father, Rick Hayes, and discuss the complicated issues that parents face today, as well as some of the oldest questions in the book. From the latest research and the framework of my relational parenting method, we offer thought-provoking solutions to your deepest parenting struggles. Added bonuses include intergenerational wounding discussions and guest childcare experts. We will also start taking your parenting questions in episode 5, so be sure to comment with your biggest questions or email me directly at jenny@jennyb.co. Let's get started. Well, welcome, Jeevan. I'm so excited that you are here with us to share a dad's perspective.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
A modern dad's perspective.
Yes.
We'll see how modern I am. Others can judge that.
Good.
Awesome. Well, Jeevan, why don't we just jump in with like who you are and where you're coming from and your parenting, like where you're at in your parenting journey right now.
Yeah, I'll give the I'll give the short version. So I have two girls, a recently turned 8-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. I live in the Bay Area with them and my wife.
Cool.
My mother-in-law lives with us as well, and my parents are sort of down the street. So we have an extended family support system around us, which is tremendous.
Very nice.
Yeah. And for work, my wife works at Meta doing marketing, and I do marketing and growth work in the Bay Area where we live as well.
Very cool.
In terms of where I am in the parent journey, I guess just a couple maybe salient highlights. We spent a year living in LA and just moved back to the Bay Area. It was a foray into LA to be closer to my wife's family. And we enjoyed that journey, but particularly our older daughter was really yearning to be back in her old stomping grounds here in the Bay Area. And so a big reason for our move back, in addition to career stuff, was primarily to put our daughters in an environment where we thought they would thrive.
Nice.
So Jeevan, you and I met because you found me. I think you found me on LinkedIn.
That's right.
And you were starting, at the time, you wanted to start a central hub for parents to find parenting resources and parent coaches. And you and I kind of dove into that a little bit. You created a website and brought in some people who had been searching for parenting advice. And that's kind of gone on the back burner now, but all along the way, you've also you've given me some tips for my website and just different things for growth and for my marketing and all of that. And along the way, I've learned a bit about your parenting journey and your parenting concerns and being a girl dad and all of those things and some of your history of your childhood as well, and the things that you've been very conscious of shifting as you became a parent and a dad of girls, and kind of the questions that you ask yourself. So I would love to know kind of what are your top 2 or 3 parenting goals that you have right now, being either goals or concerns, I guess, things that you're working with as a parent right now with a 2.5-year-old and an 8-year-old girl looking up to you.
You know, I like that you said goals or concerns, because one of the things I have observed in my roughly 8-year parenting journey is that, you know, I can look at things from an aspirational point of view, right? Which is what is the joy I want to cultivate in my children's lives and our family's life. And often I can also look at things sort of the flip side of that are like, what are the things I'm most concerned and worried about? And those two things
Yeah.
are essentially two sides of the same coin often.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I find that depending how I think about it, right, one can be a nerve-wracking experience, and then the other can be a joy-eliciting experience. And so I do try to reframe some of my challenges and worries into a more positive, like, what am I pursuing? So with that as sort of context, the first thing that's very top of mind for me is resilience. And, we've talked a little bit about this. I grew up in Jamaica, in an Indian, sort of household. And, we've seen everybody's had their own share of adversity. I had my flavor of it. And you do everything in your power to give your kids a great life, much in the way I'm sure, Rick, you've done for Jennie. And in that process, I guess the worry is that I've made things almost too easy, too comfortable, things that that may feel like the unknown or an adversity type situation. It's hard for my children, particularly my 8-year-old, I worry that it might be hard for her to navigate that. Because she's not getting the reps in that. So how do you build resilience unless you have the reps in navigating moments of adversity? And I think you and I briefly talked about this at one point, and something I think you pointed out to me and others have pointed out to me is that the adversity that my children will face, the shape and the nature of that might be fundamentally different than the shape and nature of adversity I faced. And so I've worried less about that, but I am trying to give my kids opportunities to build resilience, right? Whether that is they're trying something and they want to give up, and I sort of try to be curious about why they want to give up and what would it look like if they kept trying. I also think about what are things outside of their comfort zone I can introduce them to that they will keep persisting on. And so resilience, I think, is really top of mind. Before I go deeper, anything you want to touch on there?
I think what came up for me while you were talking was that just another level to the statement that their hardship, their adversity will just look different than yours. Just another layer to that is to say that life is always going to be hard for anyone, no matter who you are. There's always going to be hurdles or things because we're all thinking and emotional beings, and our experience of the world comes from inside of us, not outside of us. So it's not the situation that we're in, it's our experience and mindset towards that situation that determines how we feel about it. And in emotional intelligence work, and a lot of what I do teach parents with relational parenting is we're looking at the emotion or the need behind a behavior, and emotions, how we feel about a situation is always going to be the thing we have to overcome. Just like you said, that the goal and the concern are two sides of the same coin, and depending on which side of that coin I focus on determines how I feel about it. I think that with our children, like you said, their adversity will look different, but they will have adversity. They will have something to overcome because we always have something to overcome in our internal landscape.
Yeah, that resonates. I think that's something that's taken me a longer time to fully acknowledge and internalize, but I see it more and more. I mean, COVID being a classic example, even the social structures that exist today, just a lot of the way they interact and engage in society, I think is fundamentally different than when I was growing up. So I think what you're saying is spot on.
You said one thing, you look at things from both sides, right? Two sides of a coin. Aren't most mathematical formulas when you listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson talk. All the great physics stuff is supposed to work forwards and backwards. That's a philosophical technique, to look at the reverse and make sure it's a way of making sure things make sense. It's like, and then the thought was, I resonate with your experience of, well, here's my upbringing. It was not quite the arena, the circumstances I was raising my kids in. And so then you have to kind of extract the values. Well, what did I like? What don't I want to like? Or what don't I want to recreate? And then how do you make that go forward? Once you've got a goal, then there's the dad job, the parenting job of, okay, let's try to steer through the circumstances to create the experience you want. How much resilience, how do you create that if it's not, if there aren't bears and wolves prowling around to help build that? How much do you need in the modern world? What's modern resilience look like? Compared to things. That's such a parenting situation. Where you're trying to figure out what to do for your kids. I really admire that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think what you're saying connects a lot to what Jenny's saying about sort of Jenny's point about the adversity looking different, and everybody's going to face adversity. And to your point, that arena may not be bears and physical dangers per se.
Yeah,
but it's different. And I think part of my journey is examining some of my preconceived biases about the right way to build resilience.
Exactly.
Right. And that's very difficult for me, because a lot of how I was raised was, okay, you face an adversity, you just run through that wall. That's what you do. Right. It was less about compassion and empathy and let's talk about it. It was more like, go into my brother, who is 10 years younger than me. So it's a big gap between us. And he will readily point out that in some ways I was like a sort of pseudo father figure. I did that with him when he was younger, when he wanted to learn how to swim. Rather than me being empathetic as a bigger brother, I just threw him in the pool and said, "Figure it out." He remembers this. Yeah, he brought it
That's
up
a
to me
great
the other
resilience
day.
builder. You lived,
Exactly.
right? What's the problem with my approach? You lived.
Exactly. And I totally forgot
that.
this, but he brought it up to me the other day, and it is something I find challenging, which is when my 8-year-old encounters adversity and she's feeling challenged by it, she'll come to me and she might be in tears and I have this knee-jerk reaction in my mind that I subdue of like, it's okay, push through it. And I'm trying to evolve and learn that, okay, that may not be the best response. There is a way to empathize and explore her emotions. At the same time, to be fully transparent, I struggle with how much is too much. Like, at what point do you just say,
Yeah.
"Hey, it's tough, but like we're not going to keep having this conversation and nurturing it, and just go do it." And tying it back a little bit to your point, Jenny, about some of my parenting philosophies, one thing that is pretty important to me is being present for my children, and that means physical presence. So up until my wife was pregnant with our first, I used to travel for work every week. And when we got close to my first being born, I switched careers. And the number one reason was I want to be physically there. A lot of parenting happens serendipitously. I can't just plan for us to have quality time.
Yeah.
She serendipitously will bring something up important, at breakfast or on the way to soccer practice, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think, I mean, we've talked about this before, Jenny, as well, which is I took time off work and quit my job and just spent 100% of my time with my older one for a while. Did that with my younger one too. And I've been so physically present for my children. And I see that sometimes they want my presence around. I sometimes worry, have I created a dependence, right? That they don't know how, they're not building that independence. And so it just goes back to this thing of like all of my philosophies, there's some little worry underneath it that I have to pressure test.
Yes. Yeah. And I think there's a balance
there's
to strike.
Yes.
There's if the exact same, highly emotional reaction or fear, to a specific situation happens, maybe for me it was karate. I would constantly have fears, and I would cry before karate practice, training and things. And one day we told this story on one of the other episodes. Both my dad and my mom were sitting there and being empathetic and whatever. And the final thing at the end of that conversation, after validating my emotions and having had this conversation a million times, was, so here's the deal. Either you go to karate tonight, or you are making the choice to give up karate. If it's causing this much turmoil for you, maybe it's not the right thing for you. And that, when it became like, we love you, we understand this is hard, and you can't keep doing this. Either you're torturing yourself or you're torturing us, and you need to make a choice. And it was kind of like, when they asked me that question, like, are you going or are you quitting karate? I was like, oh, well, I'm going, obviously. And I just needed someone to give me that perspective of like, here's the thing. You can't live in this mode of like torturing yourself emotionally, and you can't live in this in between place where someone is constantly having to manage you in order to get you to go do this thing that you said you want to do. And so I think there is a healthy balance, and there is a level of boundary to set when something gets a little too indulgent, because we can, as human beings, indulge in our emotions. We can spiral down into it and set up camp there, right? Yeah. Especially if we're getting empathy and attention for it. And so I think that there is a way. I'd be interested to see if you have an example where you've had to set that boundary with one of your girls ever, when it comes to like, okay, how much empathy and understanding is too much,
finding the level.
I've done that many times. Sorry, Rick, were you saying something?
Just say the calibrating is where do you find the level? How do you go about finding the level?
It feels like the $1 million question, right? Because I think that one of the challenges I have, I don't have an issue pulling that, like, quote unquote early, like not letting it linger too fast. The thing that I think about is, will this backfire? Specifically, to address your question, I've given her choices on things. Martial arts, you brought up karate. I did it with Kung Fu when she was doing Kung Fu a couple years ago. And I would say, when she didn't want to go, hey, I didn't say maybe as well thought as your parents said to you, but I did say something to the effect of, either we are saying this is something we're stopping and we're not going to do this anymore, or we're going to keep pushing through and we're going to continue on this journey. And her answer back was, okay, I'm out. Right. Like, you're giving me an out kind of thing. And that's when I say, oh, well, that was not the outcome I wanted. Now, of course, I have a bias that that's a good outcome. Maybe it's good that she self-selects out of it and finds something else.
Find something she actually enjoys.
Right. That's where I struggle. So we negotiated around that. And I said, okay, look, you tried it for X time. Let's give it this fixed period of time. After that, if you decide you're not going to go back, I will not challenge you. So she did it for a full year. And that actually coincided when we were moving to LA. And when we were moving to LA, I said, would you like to pursue this again? She said, no. And I said, okay, you did it for a year. You persisted. I'm proud of you. You did not give up. It's not eliciting joy. Now we can move on.
Yeah. Nice. Now you've given it a fair trial. That was usually what I did with the kids was, well, okay, because we were doing it as a group. Jennie and her two brothers and I were all doing it together. But when they wanted to quit, because there was always the discussion on the way to karate about, oh, woe is me, and I should be doing something else. And so what I ended up framing was, well, okay, but you can't sit home and watch TV. We're all going to karate.
Right.
What's your plan for the other activity? and then that got them thinking. And what you did is great for you. You kind of want to. That's making the situation where they have to persevere. That's getting the reps, getting the persistence. It's like, well, you started to stick with the team till the end of the season, or you committed. See your commitment through. Those are all great lessons.
And the
And it's
negotiation.
yeah,
I
the
love
negotiation is good.
how you
Yeah,
negotiated with her, and said, here's, we value perseverance and we don't just quit. And sometimes things are really hard and you just have to overcome that hurdle, and then things kind of even out, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't regret sticking with something. And so teaching her that piece and negotiating with her, and then saying, if after that you decide this still is not the thing for you, I fully support that, and you can find another activity, and I think that also teaches our kids to not just pursue something because somebody else wants us to.
Mm-hmm.
It teaches our kids to actually tap in and listen and do the hard thing, but then go, is this something I care about? Is this something that I need, that I want to be doing,
Mm-hmm.
internally, intrinsically motivated? And then they get to decide, and giving her that choice is extremely powerful and will build her own sense of self and knowing herself.
Yeah, and that resonates because to your point about the child not feeling like they're doing it because they're doing it for you exclusively.
Yeah.
We've had this challenge around playing a team sport. So
Mm.
her core activity is gymnastics, which I love that she does it and she gets joy from it.
cool.
And I've been encouraging her to try a team sport for a while. When she was 3, I knew the only way she would try a team sport if I was the coach, or 4 rather. She was 4,
Yeah.
and so we did. Basketball has always been my favorite sport. She knows that, so I coached a basketball team, and she joined. And of course, at 4, she disliked it. She was also the only girl on the team, so I think she disliked it even more.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, that's unfortunate.
And I think that was probably more along the time where I was a little bit more rigid in my ways of like, yeah, okay, it's going to be tough, but we're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
I was probably less empathetic then, or maybe not less empathetic, but just more sort of like, here's the answer.
Yeah.
Anyways, fast forward, and I've been pushing her to try a team sport for a while. She's declined, and so basketball has been the natural one I've like persisted on.
Mhm.
And I did it. She knows that I'm into basketball, and so I figured it would just be obvious why I'm pushing basketball, because that's a sport I know. And I
Mhm.
realized the subtext of what I was telling her when she told me one day. She said, "Dad, that's your journey, not mine."
Wow. She used your words on you
Oh.
Yeah,
a little bit.
yeah. This was about a year
Good for
ago.
her. Good for her.
And when
Oh,
she
man.
said that, I realized, oh, she thinks, and to be fair, I think there was truth in what she was saying. Um, but I am sending her the signal that like you need to do this because like that's what I love, and you need to do what I love, and like
Mm.
she probably saw that as like I'm going to love her if she does what I want her to do, and I realized, holy cow, like
Yeah. Be
I'm
like
doing
me.
something really wrong here. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I really sat down with her and I said, I will not bring this up to you ever again. Here is why I am pushing on a team sport. And I talked to her
Yeah.
about executive function skills, teamwork, leadership,
Yeah.
reacting under pressure when you have to coordinate. I explained to her the intrinsics.
Mm.
And I said, you're
Yeah.
Yeah.
right. I just sort of like predisposed an answer, but really what I'm solving for is this broader thing. Why don't
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
talk to your friends and see how you think you might get those
Yeah.
Oh,
reps?
That's really hard because our kids'
amazing.
experiences take us outside of our own. Your expertise. We naturally gravitate towards our own expertise, trying to lead our children, but
Right.
that sometimes that can go the wrong way. You end up the dad in the stand screaming at the kid to do the thing that you never achieved, or so. That can go way too far. Um, excellent, excellent. I bet
Even
that's
with
got to be a
an
struggle
amazing
for everybody.
intention.
Yeah.
Like your intention was, this is so funny. I think this happens between adults too, in partnerships, in romantic relationships.
Mm.
Our intention doesn't come out, our experience does. And
Yeah.
so our intention is that I want my child to get the experience and gain these life skills, right? This
Right.
executive function, reacting under pressure, being a team player. Like those are all super important life skills to develop and can be developed by playing a team sport. But because
Yeah.
the way you experienced those was through basketball, that's the only thing that came out was in communication was basketball. And a 7-year-old looking at her father and saying, "That's your journey, not mine,"
That's a great
is
picture.
amazing. Is amazing. And the fact that you could then respond and reflect, not get mad, not get defensive, not lay down the law, but go, "Oh shit, I've been miscommunicating what I want for her." And then you were able to
Yeah.
put language to your actual intention,
Yeah.
and bring her into that conversation and like discuss and negotiate and put the power back on her. Hey, why don't you go ask your friends? Like, this is fantastic. This is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the other thing I realize is that the conversation I'm having with her when I'm trying to encourage her to do something, that conversation extends beyond that moment in time, right? It's all the subtle things she's observing outside of that interaction. And I'm a huge basketball junkie, right? So she sees me watching basketball. She sees me practicing in the driveway. She sees me going to my league games. So she sees all this, and here's this guy saying, "You do it." And so I'm not being thoughtful enough about what's the full narrative that's shaping up in her mind, right? Which this whole thing, going back to your first question around parenting philosophy, one of the things I've incorporated is really asking myself, what if I'm completely wrong about this thing I'm asking my kid to do or I'm trying to teach my kid? What if I'm like completely wrong about this?
Yeah.
Under what conditions might I be completely wrong? And I try to explore that. And my wife is exceptional at teasing that out.
Yeah.
Complimentary. That's great. Yeah, that's if you can't ask yourself if you're crazy, am I right? That can be real dangerous. That's a great parenting skill. That's a big part of what I like about doing this podcast is talking about things I wish I had known earlier in my parenting career. So you're not figuring it out. What wouldn't it be great if we knew all these experiences that we have learning about ourselves when we're parenting, if we could somehow have all that before we had kids or earlier in the process, so you were just laying in wait for the issue to come up and say, "Oh, okay, I know how to handle this," and execute our goals a little better. I think that's the value of a podcast like this, is parents listening to this and learn. As long as you have the ability to learn from others, then you get that a little bit earlier than having to work your way through your own children together. Just using your own children as an experience to gather wisdom. That's a great story. I love. I can see a little sticker. That's your journey, Dad. Little girl talking to her dad.
She
got a whole picture in my head of that. That's a great picture.
She coaches me all the time, and I think that's one of the gifts I've got is I think she coaches me and gives me more areas to improve on than the reverse.
Good for her. Yeah.
And she is very excellent at highlighting those things. And I take it. I tell her all the time, I'm open to feedback. I actually tell her, like, I want to be a better dad day in, day out, week in, week out.
Sure.
And so she will communicate that with me. And I think the beauty of that is she develops a growth mindset, right? So, she actually uses the word feedback because I tell her I'm open to feedback and she'll tell me stuff. And then so she'll tell me I'm open to feedback. What do you think I could do better in a certain category?
Yeah.
So, she actually started her own blog the other day. I helped her do that. We were at the library. And then she said, "Oh, make sure you send it to this person and that person and this person. And of course, parent anxiety immediately, right? I was like, oh, you're developing this social media anxiety of like, you want to get validation from others. And so I started like, my lecture on like, let's not get too carried away about getting validation from others. And she goes, Dad, I just want to get feedback on how I can improve it.
That's a fantastic success story too, that she can do that. We were talking before, you mentioned before about worrying about making her dependent, on a certain style, but also what we're doing is teaching her how to recognize a good style, so later in her life, when she's running into other people or mate selection or whatever, she not having that, and okay, now that's kind of a red flag for her. Hey, I can't work through things, this guy's not open to a little feedback, so it turns out being super valuable. That sounds really, really healthy.
And what an amazing trust you've created, because for you, an adult who technically has power over, right? Power over a child, for you to create a space for her to welcome her feedback. I welcome your opinion. I want to hear what you think. Like that, telling her that without even saying the words, telling her that her opinion and experience matter to you.
Yes.
That one sets her up with expectations, Dad, like you said, of either a partner or even anyone she surrounds herself with for the rest of her life, to be an open, communicative person. It also sets her up, like you said, she says back to you, Jeevan, I'm open to feedback. And she's seeking that growth in whatever it is she chooses to pursue. She's seeking that growth. And so not only is she going to be able to grow and overcome failure, because if she's ready to get feedback, she knows it's not always going to be what she wants to hear. That's going to build resilience in her and her confidence to overcome those things, overcome comments, or improve something. She's just going to blossom, and she's going to surround herself with people who are like that as well. I think that's an amazing foundation that you've laid for her.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Yeah. Congratulations, both you and your wife. Well done.
I will happily take that validation, because it doesn't feel that way often.
Right? It doesn't ever feel like it when you're in it.
Not in the moment. Yeah. That's
so
funny.
what's another one of your kind of parenting goals / concerns that you regularly work with?
Let's go. It's always easy for me to go to a concern, which is something I'm trying to improve on, but
it's okay.
It's something that is and it goes back to being a girl dad, something that is very top of mind for me, right? And I always have to think about why I have a certain view, how it might be informed, in my childhood trauma, right? I use trauma lightly there, or just the way I was raised, right? But I was raised in an Indian culture. I was raised in Jamaica, and I was raised. I'm in my 40s now, right? So I have largely seen women take a back seat to men a lot of my life. And that's still the case today, even though we've made significant progress. And so that is very high on my list of concerns. And I don't know the right way to sort of solve for that, right? So I'll give an example, which is I really try to introduce things to my girls that I feel are either gender neutral or something that classically gets assigned to a boy, right? Whether it's math, cars, dump trucks, whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
And my older one really gravitates to dolls and, very interested in nail polish and things like that. And
Yeah.
I've never set like a limitation on, whatever you want to play with. But when it starts
Yeah.
to get into the beauty products, right? Like, oh, I have friends with nail polish, and oh, actually, I'm curious to try makeup for my birthday. My anxiety
Piercing.
rises, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it rises because I feel like, this division is getting created where the boys get all the opportunities and the girls are just meant to, look a certain way, and the language that's being presented to them. And, she saw that this
Yeah.
Barbie movie came out. She didn't watch it, but like, she's just so interested in like, what the Barbie culture is. And anyways, it's a long wind up to say it's something I talk to her about it. I say, this is why I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
this thing might be too materialistic or too emphasizing looks too much, but I struggle with that.
Mm,
It's tough. You have to
yeah.
replace that with something, or they have to replace that with something because it is so prevalent and so easy to fall into.
But
I
but I
think
think the
it's,
other thing is I don't know what's healthy and not healthy.
Yeah.
yeah. That's a hard one, especially coming from a place where you are male. You don't know necessarily unless you love nail polish and beauty products, and which is also fine. But I'm assuming from your appearance that you don't,
Yeah.
and so you don't necessarily understand the feeling or the draw or how fun those things can be for girls,
Mhm.
and how coming from a feminine perspective, those beauty products, yes, it can get toxic. It can become like looking at the women in the magazines and they're airbrushed and they're fake, and you want to strive to be and look like that. But in my older and wiser adult years, it has become something that I can utilize in order to fully express who I am,
Mhm.
and how I want to show up in the world. And so
Hmm.
I think that there is a very balanced way to allow your daughter's curiosities and interest, and a very natural interest in beauty products, in nail polish, in maybe fashion or whatever she is gravitating towards, to be this fun experimental thing, and allowing her to explore that. And then also having those conversations when you notice that something is, like, the reason she's doing it is because she wants to look like a certain person from somewhere that's fake,
Right.
or so not making those desires, those innate desires of hers, wrong, that could cause her to reject that part of herself in some way, but allowing her to be excited, to want to try these things, to figure out what she likes and doesn't like. And, friends are going to influence that a little bit. And having those, like you said, those conversations will come up serendipitously, and you can touch on makeup being a tool for self-expression, not
Mm-hmm.
to transform into something else.
Yeah.
That's what I
You
would
use.
add there.
Sorry, go ahead, Rick.
Is I'm sorry. I remember makeup and makeovers being when we'd have a family gathering. The girl cousins would get together and they'd run out and get some nail polish or fake nails or stuff, and it was an enjoyment. It was a fun thing, bonding thing. I also remember taking you, I think, homecoming dress shopping once or
Mm,
prom dress
yeah.
shopping once. And as you would try different things on, I was very much out of my element picking out, styles for 14, 16-year-old girls, whatever you were at the time. And I just remember all I had to offer was like, well, what's the message you want to send here? You'd put on a
Yeah.
slinky one, you'd put on
Mhm.
something a little more decorative. And I just remember the only thing I could think of to do at that point was like, well, what's the message you're trying to send? And I
Hmm.
would think it would be the same kind of thing with makeup and glitz and bling and all that kind of thing. Is, yeah, it's one thing to have a professional appearance in a professional setting, or a fun appearance in a fun setting, a Halloween costume or something. But somehow to shield you, it's don't make it part of your identity, make it part of your costume, was the underlying message. is where it gets I think where it ggets unhealthy, where it really you're doing it for other people, seeking approval.
Mm-hmm.
And how to negotiate that, boy, that's going to be different for every parent and child, I would think, and their circumstances.
Yeah. I think that two things that you both touched on that really hit. Jenny, you mentioned the word explore. Well, actually, you mentioned two words that I thought really resonate: explore and tool. Right. So the idea that I can have my child explore these things, I think reduces the weight and anxiety that I feel towards it. So and the flip side is what you were talking about, Rick, right? Where you were saying don't make it your identity, right? And I think that's the fear. Is I sometimes have that 0 to or 1 thinking, where it's like, either you're not into makeup as a proxy for a broader category of things, or you're like fully in it and it's your identity, right? And this middle ground I find very hard to navigate, but I think that middle ground is what you're both circling around when you frame it as something you're exploring, something that's a tool with a specific purpose, e.g., expressing yourself, but it's not all consuming of your identity. And I really struggle in untangling that middle ground. One tool I have used to try to untangle it when she's interested in these things, like she got these I guess they're kind of like extensions. It's a clip-on thing you put in your hair, and it kind of gives you some fake purple hair on the side. And so I've asked her, like, hey, I try not to come across as like the judgmental dad, and I say, hey, tell me, what's it's hard, but I'm like, tell me,
think before you speak.
Yeah, like, what's, and I have to think about my tone. I don't want to be like, hey, why are you wearing that purple thing, right? So I'm like, tell me what's so interesting about this, or why are you wearing this today? Inside, I'm thinking, why are you wearing this purple thing?
Right.
But I think it at least opens the conversation in a better way. But the tricky thing is she's 8, so she's not really sure why, right? And she says that. She's like, I don't know, it's just cool. And then
she's
so I just tell her,
feedback.
right, I guess. And so I just tell her, I think one thing maybe this goes to one of the parenting philosophy things, is I realize I rarely have the answer, right? So what I can do is elucidate my thinking, right? That I can do, and I can tell her in that thinking that I don't have the answer. So I do that with her. I say, hey, look, you're wearing this hair clip thing. It looks like it's something you're enjoying. It's fun for you. Great. I'm happy it's bringing joy to you. I will tell you as a dad, there's one thing I'm thinking about, and I don't have the answer for it. And it's that I don't want you to get too wrapped up in this and feel that you need to wear it to look a certain way. And I sort of articulate what I'm thinking about. And then I extract myself and say, go live your life. That's
right.
At least my technique for now.
I think that's all there is, It's when I'm sitting here watching Jenny pick out a dress, it's all fear-based, and it's not something in my experience. It's not in my wheelhouse. And so all you can do is bring hopefully a more mature, I've spent more time figuring things out than you. So you bring a method of, here's what I see. Explain your thinking. They're old enough to appreciate that and pick up on that. That's modeling good behavior. And then say, I don't know, but I don't see any huge red flags here. I don't think this is something you're going to die from soon. And so, okay, knock yourself out. Just, here's my concern. I think that's all we can do. That's probably a core task of a parent, is of raising a self-motivated kid. That I think that's a perfect example.
Well, and you didn't judge it. That's the other thing that came up for me, is that you didn't lay your concern onto her so that she then internalized it. You just said, you entered with curiosity, even though it's something that was foreign to you, something you didn't understand. You noticed that it created a worry or a fear in you, but you chose curiosity, and then you shared your thought with her in a way that was like, I don't have the answer, and this is just my concern, and that I don't want you to, you know, identify with having to wear that in order to be cool. If you like
Mm-hmm.
it, awesome, fully support you, live your life like you said. And you
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
judge her or criticize the fact that, cuz I remember certain clothes that I wanted to wear that were deemed unacceptable, um and or told that I couldn't buy that, when I was out school clothes shopping, not because like it was too short or too revealing or anything. It just wasn't the color that my parent thought I should get. um
Mm-hmm.
and it was like I had to constantly like justify and convince that I wanted pink and purple things, not blue and green things. And that's like a nugget from my childhood that has stuck with me into adulthood in the way that I decorate or create my home with things I like, not creating it because I think someone who walks into my home will like it.
Mm-hmm.
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 You know what I mean?
When you're
Yeah.
So I
younger,
just,
that's kind of a power struggle, kind of an unnecessary power struggle thing.
yeah, like let your kid like what they like. Like it's just like
Yeah.
it's not hurting them.
I don't see
And
any
you're,
harm. Knock yourself out. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I really love that. And really since our first conversation, Jeevan, I've always been very impressed with your, not that you need my approval, but I just want to tell you this as a compliment, is that I've always been very impressed um, with your approach and your awareness of yourself and your biases. And this is how I was raised, and I'm worried about doing this to my kids, but I also know that I need to step back and look at it through a different lens. Or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you have a growth mindset, and you're very exploratory in the way that you approach things. And I'm curious. I'm curious because in my experience, it's rarer to me, in my experience, to find that in the male figure, in the male
Mm-hmm.
parenting figure, in dads. It's also, in my experience, there are much fewer supports set up that are aimed at dads specifically. I think that there's a lot of um, perinatal supports, moms becoming moms, the transition into motherhood, the needs of a woman when she's in that vulnerable space, the way men can step up and support women, things like that. And then there's a lot of like parenting advice, but there's very little dad specific advice, because I am someone who believes
Mm-hmm.
that the mom experience and the dad experience, women and men experience things differently. We have different
Mm-hmm.
societal expectations. We're raised differently often, and with different perspectives. And I'm curious how much support you've seen or
Mm-hmm.
experienced in the dad world specifically.
Yeah, it's a great question. First, very quickly, I wanted to say thank you for the kind words, and that
Yeah.
it's mutual. Like ever since we've been chatting, I've been incredibly impressed and in awe of just your thoughtfulness and your ability to hear what somebody's saying and sort of take it to its conclusion or implication. And so I
Oh,
love our chats. So thank you for that.
thank you.
Um, the dad support thing is interesting because I think about it a lot. And I'll share a quick anecdote that I think elucidates some of what I've observed. I was on a camping slash glamping trip for my daughter's incoming third grade class. So all the parents, or not all the parents, but a lot of the parents and their kids went, and it was sort of like a bonding experience.
Nice. Yeah.
And the moms of the third graders have a WhatsApp chat, and they've had it for years, like when they were in second grade, when they were in first grade, and it's a very active chat, I think like a
Yeah.
daily active thing.
Yeah.
And I had not heard about whether there was a dad chat or not. I had sort of heard maybe there was one, and I overheard two dads talking about some dad chat. So I beelined it over there and I said, "Hey, I heard something about a dad chat. Can you add me?"
Yeah.
And
it's kind of secretive
and,
on the dad side.
here's the thing. He says, "Yeah, I can add you. Full disclosure, the last update was 5 months ago, right?
Yeah.
The last
Yeah.
message, right?
Yeah.
He's like most of the messages on there are like so and so has changed their profile picture or so and so has changed their phone number. Like that's the chat,
Expectation management. Yeah.
right? That's the chat, and and I will add to that one thing my wife does a great job, and a lot of her female friends do a great job of, is like they plan stuff, right? They get people
Mm.
together. Their activation energy is always there, right? Like let's do something, and they're always the logistics people, they're the planning people, they're the organizers. And I think my observation is that if you and at the camping place, the dads were super engaged, they were like all in with their kids, but it's getting them from 0 to 1. Somebody has to kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
create the surface area, organize the thing, and then the dads are all in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, they're not the starters. Like they need somebody to set it up. And I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've generally not been that person. And my wife and I talk about it, and she'll openly call me out, right? She's like, when we're going on a trip, like I'm not the one who has the list ready to pack. I'm not the one who thinks about when we should go on vacation. And
Yeah.
I think it's a gender bias thing that I'm trying to correct. And it's a long way of saying that, like, I think that if there's a way to crack that, to get dads to just sort of jump that initial hurdle, it will unlock a lot of dad support and engagement. Because I am in some dad groups, like on Facebook, and they actually
Yeah.
have tons of engagement. But I think it's
Nice.
like you need somebody to seed that conversation.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
also, there's also a societal piece in that I think that it has been historically more acceptable for women to seek help than for men. I think that there is a construct that exists inside of the toxic masculinity part of things where you shouldn't ask for help. You should be able to handle anything. You're the providers, you're the protectors, you're this. And so you should never need support or help. And I think that men's mental health has suffered horribly because of that. Because men are afraid to ask for help, are afraid to be like, my kid is doing this and I don't know how to handle it, or I fucked up, admitting fault, admitting that we need help, that we don't know everything. I think has been even more taboo from the male side of things. So I think that has slowed the activation of dad support groups too.
Yeah, I think that's, we talked an episode or two ago. We got into gender roles and what's going on now, and I think there's I think the sexes, there are at least roles that are different that way. I'm in like 3 men's groups now, and there's always one guy that gets it going, sets a time and a place, and guys show up. But when it comes time to organize other things, it's it's usually the same guy or 2 or 3 that are getting the herd going, and other guys showing up. It's kind of like a job, it's a concrete task. I want to do this. What time is it? Where do I need to be? Okay. But we're just not as people oriented, right? Isn't that the stereotype? The females are a little more people oriented, guys are a little more thing oriented. And so planning a party just kind of naturally falls to the person who wants to have a party, whereas the guys are like, okay, I need to fix a car and the garage is over there. So we'll get over there at that time and work on the car, work on ourselves or whatever it is we're working on, we're working on something. And, that's way too simple. But I think we can train all we want, but it's going to be a hard sell because there's some pressure to make it that way, and but we can certainly nudge it, because there is so much benefit to having a thoughtful guy, kid-oriented guy around so much. Divorce now is horrible. Guys lose that. You'd mentioned earlier on, that spontaneous, serendipitous
Mm-hmm.
kind of contact with their kids that's so
Mm-hmm.
important. And there's certainly things around that we can work on fixing.
Yeah. I'm optimistic that this will shift and improve and reach a better equilibrium. But I think something you said, Jenny, that resonates is this point about, men may have a predisposition to not look for that help, not ask for that help.
Yeah.
I think you're right that it does tie to poor mental health if you're not willing to sort of raise that hand.
Yeah.
I think, I mentioned the sort of 0 to 1 challenge of like the activation energy of guys like getting together and have that.
Yeah.
But as I hear you talk and I think about my interactions, I do think it goes beyond that too, right? So if a bunch of moms from my kids' school get together and they don't really know each other, but they have a mom's night, and you juxtapose that with a bunch of dads getting together, let's say they get there, somebody activates them, the conversations are also fundamentally different, I think, in two ways. Often, I think one is that the moms will get to vulnerability quicker, right? They will put their cards on the table much quicker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this just, anecdotally, right? And so I think that's part of it. And then I think the other part of it is often like these moms are getting together, they're already thinking like, oh, I can get advice from this mom. They can, I'm figuring this thing out with my kid. And the dads are thinking, to sort of make it maybe overly stereotypical, but I think there's truth to it. Hey, I can go hang out with the guys and, we'll talk about sports. Right. So I think there's a combination of vulnerability difference, and there's a combination of intent difference sometimes when these gatherings happen as well.
I think that's exactly right. In a group of guys, it's more like guys are sitting there figuring out, it kind of goes to the protector role. Guys are sitting there figuring out, what can I reveal without creating any harm, without having any backlash, or how's this going to affect me at a job, or they're very carefully vulnerable, and it helps to activate them. It helps a lot if somebody goes first. It's like, well, I'm struggling with this, and then we'll have a discussion about everybody's struggles about that. But you do have to get them started. They don't all come primed, ready to ask advice about things.
I think that's 1,000% true. My husband has tried to explain that to me a lot.
Another gender difference, yeah.
And where I go out, and hang out with my girls, or I go out to dinner with a friend, or I seek out interactions with my girlfriends and relationships. And my husband, the bulk of his friends are still in Pennsylvania. So a lot of his network, his very close inner circle, is not here in Colorado. So that's one piece that definitely plays a part. But the friends that he does have here in Colorado, and even the newer friends that he made through my girlfriend's husbands, who he's like really connected with, it is like pulling teeth. Like they both, when we're together, they're over there having a conversation. They're like, man, we should go shooting. Man, we should like hang out. Man, we should do this. We should do that. And then they never do anything. And I'm like, I'm about to call his wife and be like, yo, we should set up a date for these guys. Like, cause I know if we schedule it and we're like, you're off this day, we've booked you the spot at the gun range from 8 to noon.
Date,
like
time,
I've
place.
packed your stuff, like you're going. I know that it would happen, but like you said, like men are not, and I believe there's a difference in feminine and masculine energy, and I believe there's different combinations and levels of those that live inside everyone. But someone who is primarily feminine and someone who is primarily masculine, I think that the masculine needs an activation, and I think that that's where the feminine can come in and do that. And sometimes that can feel frustrating or burdensome to us,
kind of childlike.
but there's also
It's a play
once
date you're
there,
scheduling.
right, once there's an activation, it's like he's the person in the relationship who makes the thing happen. I'm the creator of the vision and the energy, and then I activate him and he executes. And that's a very dumbed down version of our relationship, and it's not black and white in that way, but that's something that's top of mind for me. I love that phrasing. That's top of mind for me in my work, in my partnership, is understanding our different strengths, and that he isn't necessarily the whole point of this story was that he has explained to me it's so hard for guys to trust each other, and it's so hard for men to, because they're constantly, they don't know what that man's perspective of being a man is. And so if they don't necessarily think that sharing, our marital struggles or struggles with my kid, if those topics are not something that, they don't know that person well enough to know they're going to be willing to talk about those things, or not see me in a weakness kind of light because I want to talk about those things, then they're not going to initiate that vulnerability, and they're going to talk sports and guns and whatever. And I do have a hard time swallowing that and understanding it, because I'm like, just do it. Like, if you're the one to be vulnerable, they're probably just praying for you to take the initiative and be the vulnerable one first. But I know how hard that can be. So, yeah. Let's see. We're a little over an hour. Do you have time for us to have one more question? I have one more question for you.
Yes.
Cool. The question is still coming to me, and maybe there isn't a question. Maybe it's just a topic, but how to raise strong women, strong, confident women who can handle patriarchy without having to banish their femininity.
Feminine side. Yeah.
Yeah. What a great topic. And I definitely don't have the answer. I do think a lot of my philosophy comes down to just being transparent about what I'm thinking. And my 8-year-old and I will often ask the why not question.
There you go. Good
so
for her.
We do that with a lot of things. Like, for example, somebody was saying the other day, oh yeah, the garbage man's outside, and my daughter and I were like, well, how do we know that? How do we know it's not a garbage woman? And so it is so embedded in everything that we talk about at home, in the car, that there is just very much why not type of philosophy, and I incorporate in everything, right? So
fantastic.
My 2.5-year-old likes to wear this like Tiana pajama nightgown, right? And
all day, every day.
Oh yeah, exactly, right? It's all about Tiana.
Yeah.
And I always tell her, can Papa wear it, right? And it's largely a fun thing because it like teases her, and she's like, no, it's mine, you can't wear it. Okay, maybe next time.
Yeah.
But it's also just to really push the predispositions we have.
Fantastic.
And I think my 8-year-old has internalized that a lot. So it's a pretty big, heavy topic about allowing them to embrace things and engage in things that maybe have been typically male centric, while still keeping whatever feminine aspects of their identity, traditionally feminine aspects of their identity they want to keep.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the other thing I think about is skill set and mindset. And
Yeah.
mindset is my main focus, right? So math is a great example. I noticed, I used to volunteer at one of my daughter's old schools when they used to do these math activities, and I just noticed generally the boys, they have this thing of like, oh yeah, we can do math, and then the girls, they're equally capable. If not, they were probably better at math.
Sometimes,
But I
yeah.
don't but I don't think people were telling them that, like, you're a mathematician, you're
Mm.
mathematical, you can be this thing.
Mm.
So there's already
Yeah.
this preconceived mindset. And so one thing I tell my daughter all the time, she'll tell me, oh, like this math is hard or something. I say, I'm not worried about the skill. You'll get it
Mm.
when you get it. But I do want to think about the mindset more than the skill set, right? Like, I
Mhm,
don't want you to
mhm.
say, I can't do this, I can't do that. If you want to use the word yet
Yes.
at the end, that's okay.
Yeah.
So, she'll say, oh, I
Yes.
can't do this math thing. And I say, huh? And she'll say, oh, yeah, you're right. I can't do this math thing yet. Because I
That's so
Yeah.
think
great.
what's happening, my observation is that sometimes these things that are traditionally associated with men, if a boy can't get it, they're just like, oh, I'm having a hard time. And the girl
Yes.
sometimes can internalize that as, that's not my identity, I don't do that, I can't do that. And so
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
very focused on the mindset and the language we have around it. So we always say yet.
I
Yeah.
love that. I
I
love
wonder if that
that.
yeah, yeah. I wonder if that has to do with feeling. The girls don't feel that they can do it. They feel they don't master something right away. And if the feeling keeps them away more than the boys or something. But absolutely, girls are going to learn to be more flexible in a patriarchal society by, I would think, by learning from men, having men in their passing on information, learning into their girls. That sounds like super, super important to pick up skills where they are comfortable or dealing with guys. And I love the dad humor thing. I resonate with the teaching through a little what, yet? Yeah. Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing you said about like like the dad maybe spending time with his girls and sort of reducing the patriarchal differences that way. I think it also goes the other way. One thing I realized was I'm always the one sitting down with my daughter and doing math. So we have this thing where she has to do math, just a little bit of math almost every day.
Good.
And she sort of asked me, she was like, why can't I just do this with mommy? And
Mm.
I realized it just happened to be that that's a thing that I love. And so I do it with her. But going back to our earlier conversation, I may have the best intent, but I am sending a signal to her that, oh, daddy's the math person. Right. So what
Mm.
Yeah.
signal does that say? Is that showing?
Yeah.
And my wife called it out too. And so now we make it a point to, my wife leans in and does it sometimes. I lean in and do it sometimes. So
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
have to even, it's easy to say, oh, this is an issue, but it's hard to really self-examine and say, what might I be doing that I don't realize,
Yeah.
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 that is
The
sending a
unconscious.
signal?
I think that's huge. The sending,
Yeah.
I think that's a big, one of the biggest overarching themes that I see with a lot of parenting is that we send, and something I try to explain to parents that I'm still working on my language around is that we are constantly sending signals out into the world. We're sending signals to our partners. We're sending signals to our children. We're sending like your energy.
Mhm.
It can be felt, and these signals that we send unintentionally and can often even be non-verbal and usually are nonverbal. Like you said with your example of you were like, I like math, let's do math together, can inadvertently and completely unintentionally send the signal that mommy or girls don't do math.
Mhm.
um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it's there's definitely like a too extreme side of that where we're like over policing
Yeah.
ourselves. But I
Yeah.
think that most people,
Yeah.
again, in my experience, most people tend to the other side where they're not aware of it
Mhm.
at all, or they
Yeah.
refuse to look at it.
Yeah.
And so once again, I'm just so appreciative of the fact that you have a daughter who tells you these things, who has the language,
Mhm.
who you've made it safe for her to offer her feedback and tell you, so
Yeah.
she can reflect, so that she can be a mirror for you,
Mhm.
and that you can do the same for her, and that you're willing to look at yourself. And there's a part of like ego that plays into this too,
Mhm.
is like, is can I accept that I am an imperfect person, and that
Mhm.
any given moment, that regardless of my intention, I might be actually having this effect on somebody. And when
Mhm.
I'm willing to
Mhm.
hear that reflection back to me and sit with it or explore it or discuss it, negotiate it, that's when true relationship can happen, versus defensive, or you're little and young and wrong and you don't know me and I know
Mhm.
everything, and, you
Mhm.
know, whatever. So I just,
Not to be
yeah, there's a
questioned.
lot
Yeah.
at play there. Yeah.
It's a hard thing. It is a hard thing to give that space to your child to sort of tell you areas, like you said, put a mirror up,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think the
Yeah.
more you do it, the less uncomfortable it gets. And you, to your
Yeah.
earlier point about growth mindset, you see it more as like, can I be a better
Yeah.
dad tomorrow? Can I be even better dad a
Yeah.
week from now? And I think the answer
Yes.
is yes. But it is going to be uncomfortable, and that's where it's also important to have a good partner. My wife tells me all the time, like, hey, take it easy on that thing, or I don't think you quite had that right, and I'll self-examine
Hmm.
and say, holy shnikes, you're right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it is difficult in the moment
Yeah.
to
Yes.
execute on that.
It
It's
can
like
be,
it's a skill to some degree, and it take
yeah.
skills take practice and experience, and
Hmm.
you learn finesse after a while, but you have to get in there, and you can't get too discouraged if you're gonna improve at it. That's a great message for dads, I think, is keep at it.
Get the reps in.
You'll get better.
Right.
Get the reps in.
Persevere. And I
There
Hmm.
think
you go.
that the words difficult and uncomfortable are absolutely true. I think in some cases it can be, it can feel horrible.
Hmm.
I want to make it as real as possible for parents who are listening, because
Hmm.
discomfort, I think most people can go, I can handle a little discomfort. I think the reality sometimes of having our flaws reflected back to us can be horrifying. It can
Yeah.
be,
Hmm.
it can change your entire perception of yourself for a minute or a day or a week. It can have you crying on the bathroom floor. It can have you thinking
Yeah.
that I've screwed up my kid forever. It can have you spiraling. And I just
Hmm.
want
Yeah.
to make that very real and very visceral, so that people
Yeah.
aren't out here thinking like, oh, what a beautiful picture of parenting you guys have painted. And sometimes it's a little uncomfortable. I really like to make it as real as possible for people.
I'm glad you opened up that thread, because I will circle back to this kung fu story where I pushed my daughter
Mm,
to do it for a year before she could give up.
yeah.
Hmm.
After she stopped it and we had talked about it, and I said, you were so good at it, whatever. Like, why aren't you still interested, whatever? And at one point, she told me, "I did it for you, not for me."
Mm,
And that crushed
stop.
me, because I just thought, did I just
Oh.
make the biggest mistake and
Mm,
like punish her for a year? Just made her go to this thing,
oh. Yeah.
And so you're right. It's hard. I'm sitting here and I have the privilege, to talk about things in retrospect and highlight good things, but it's grueling day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I make more mistakes than I can count. But to your point, that is the real part of the journey, and I think you just have to accept it as part of it.
Yeah. In this social media oriented world where everybody is sharing the 10 best seconds of their life this week or this day, it's important to keep in mind it's messy. You got to get in there and mess it up and give yourself some grace and move on and go on. Don't collapse in a heap.
All right. I feel like we could open many more cans of worms. And I apologize. I don't know what is coming through on the mic. We have a guest dog this week. My friend, my bestie, dropped off her dog this morning. She's going into the mountains and he could not go with her. So there's been a lot of heavy breathing and little barks because he doesn't understand the podcast studio yet.
He's not been socialized for podcasts yet.
He's not. My dogs finally just learned that we come in here, they lay down and shut up. And this guest dog is such a little sweetie, and he doesn't understand. He's like, "Who are you talking to, and why aren't you talking to me?"
Exactly.
So for anyone listening, whatever heavy breathing or weird sounds you heard this week, it's a dog in the background. But anyway, Jeevan, thank you so much for spending time with us.
It's great to meet you.
Yes.
Nice to meet you, Rick. Thank you, Jennie.
Keep it up with those young girls. Good work. Making the world a better place.
I appreciate it. And you've done an exceptional job with Jennie. So
I like to think so. Thank you.
Yeah. And we, just to let the listeners know, one of my goals, things that I'm striving for, we're almost done, shush, has been to get more male perspective, male guests, and hopefully dads specifically. I have a couple more on the docket, and I am wanting to balance out the perspectives between men and women and moms and dads on the podcast. And so I think it's really powerful and important, the perspective that you do bring, Jeevan, and it's a voice that needs to be heard. So
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, everybody, happy parenting and good luck out there. Well, did you learn anything new? Or have you heard all of this before? Do you agree with us, disagree with us, have a question? We want to see you in our inbox or via the Patreon page in the show notes. Tap on either link to send us your feedback, share your own parenting story, or support our mission of providing a connected community for all parents. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you loved this episode, click on that little star and give us 5 of them so we can get visible to other parents who are looking for us. This is your weekly reminder. Parents, you already have everything you need inside of you. You are a strong, loving, capable parent. And here, you are never alone. I'll see you next week.